Hey guys, my name is Ramirez, Frogbear, that's what you can call me. Um, the title of this video was called Self-Imposed Dark Age. Now, what I mean by self-imposed dark age is, so there was two oil refineries that recently caught on fire. One of them was in Oregon, previously in Cuba, and most recently one in Venezuela. And this fits this very interesting pattern. um it coincides with something that I've learned about how the growth of a nation, right, the growth of a nation or the growth of GDP correlates very specifically to the use of oil, right? The more oil a nation uses, the more the population grows, the more the economy grows. um but it's just because oil is used in absolutely everything, right? But I can't remember the guy, uh famous guy. I want to say it was like early 1900s. He was the guy that noticed a trend with the more a country uses oil, the more it just expands upwards. And by self-imposed dark age, what I'm really talking about is the fact that the people who are targeting these locations, or the people that are sabotaging all of these mechanisms of our society or mechanisms of our existence, um, it's kind of very interesting to be able to like look at the trend and be like, huh, first it was the food processing plants, it was manufacturing plants. um right, there was also this weird trend where you just had random planes flying into buildings. um Other people have their theories about why these pilots just all of a sudden lost cognition and flew the plane downwards. But it fits this trend of destroying infrastructure. It fits the trend of destroying mechanisms that are basically the backbone of our, not just America but everywhere, because a lot of people use oil, right? And there's the whole push towards using electric cars, electric vehicles. And even then, right, even in the creation of these key points of right, like the charging stations, right, like even the charging station itself, the housing has portions of petroleum based products. So very interesting to kind of see this trend moving in a very specific direction. um you can also kind of correlate Biden using a lot of the reserves and kind of selling it off at the same time. And then, there was that whole blunder where he's in front of the Saudi Arabians and they're kind of like, yeah, we can give you all the oil, but you don't have any refineries. And with the loss of the one in Oregon, it just kind of fits into that whole paradigm. Um, so it's very interesting to see all of this occur at the same time. Um, the reason why I say that is because I've just been noticing a trend that doesn't necessarily work towards the benefit of our oligarchs. Now, the reason why I say that is because think about how they imposed restrictions on their workers, their employees, and it was essentially over, if you are not met up to date with certain current medical procedures, you can't work here, you can't travel, you can't do this, you can't do that. So kind of forcing people in a very locked situation where it's just, I don't know. Um, I kind of bring that up because if I learned anything from the isotope files, it was a very interesting coordination of being able to pick people. Um, but it's like, what mechanisms were they using with medical records that kind of allowed for the facilitation of all this? I don't know if that makes sense. Like, how do you find the information on certain individuals? How do you target them? And the reason why I say that is because you have to leave certain people alive, right? You can't just destroy, or you can't just get rid of all of your engineers or all of the key people that are involved in maintaining certain infrastructures that are there to maintain certain what do you call it, pipelines, right? Or pipelines, refineries, power grid people, people who understand that, right? Like the Hoover Dam recently also had an explosion, right? Very interesting to kind of see all this. And coming in with there were two very interesting earthquakes that also happened. I made videos about the one in Taiwan, but then another 7.2 also hit Mexico, and they lost certain power lines, so certain parts of the state just didn't have any power. Again, this all just fits into, are we watching our oligarchs or the people who are in charge, right? Because this all goes into intelligence, which, how do we know how much of this is planned or coordinated and how much of it is just natural coincidence? And the reason why I can't chalk it up to natural coincidence is because look at the last 2 years. Correlate the destruction of certain key parts of our infrastructure. And then there's the whole thing with baby powder, right? Baby formula. So it's kind of like, are we really watching the like key players destroy their own infrastructure? Not because it hurts them, but because it hurts us. And if you learn about Henry Kissinger, US food aid, and that large sense of these people know what's very important for the backbone of certain nations, and they're willing to really push it that far. And how much my time? 6 minutes, yeah. It's just very interesting how they're willing to drive certain wedges and certain key points into pushing certain positions. And there's also the freight train worker strike. I'm not sure if that was actually resolved or not. And that's actually when that whole thing with the freight trains and the worker union strike, that also kind of correlated with the data point of Trump having to go to Washington D.C. Right, he was still wearing his golf shoes. That whole point of mentioning the golf shoes was um, he had to leave, right? Because pay attention to, let's go back in time and let's go back to 2019, right? And they talk about how Trump spent all of his time at the golf course. Trump doesn't care about his job. Da 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 da. So them currently in today's age mentioning that Trump had to go to Washington D.C. with his golf shoes on is essentially them making a calling card to, he gave up the golf course to do something. But what was that something? I'm not going to say it was the freight train or facilitating a deal in that situation, but I don't know. This all kind of fits into very weird aspects of what's going on, especially after two very key earthquakes. Then there's also a bunch of crocodiles showed up at, like, they just went up on shore in Florida. And then there's most recently, I think it was Australia or New Zealand, where they had a bunch of whales just land up on shore. Australians? I'm not sure. I just recently watched the video. And I really do wonder what's going on, right? Like, some people don't believe that there's technology that can actually impose earthquakes, but I'm like, dude, look at Nikola Tesla. Like, that's always a key data point because, there's the New York article that corroborates it. New York doesn't really have any fault lines. And I always thought it was funny, like, how is there an earthquake in Mexico, but there's nothing occurring in California? Weird things that are just kind of correlating points in my head. Self-imposed dark age. Like, even me myself, like, I feel like I have touched. I've done some research that makes me assume and believe that I have put myself in a very dangerous situation where now I have the attention of certain key players or key actors that I'm like, did I really become a threat? I don't know. I really don't think so, but I'm starting to believe that I have. But who knows? But I think that's largely in place because I'm too on the money with it. I'm too on the money with mapping out how these feedback loops kind of feed into each other. And with Patrick Ryan and the guy who does all those PowerPoints, if you just watch The Dark Stoa, you can learn so much about the mechanisms of our world and the trends that follow with it that it's just like, it's not that hard to put these two things together in one's own head. And you know, like how do you stay safe in those situations, right? Like, do you have insurance or do you not have insurance? And in thinking of that, right, it led me to think about why are they so willing to destroy certain key parts of just the way, infrastructure, backbone stuff that allows for the facilitation of the markets, Walmart, stocking the shelves, all that sort of stuff. If they're willing to go that far ahead, I wonder what insurance do they have for themselves? Like, what would they plan on using in order to keep themselves alive? And I just thought that was a very interesting idea because it really does feel like they want to send most of us into a dark age where it's that whole thing of lowering the population numbers, and finding a perfect medium that allows them to control or put people back into that state of sleep where they're not really asking questions and they're not really sure of what's going on in the world. And it is getting pretty scary because you're starting to see a lot of retaliation from citizens. I gather a bunch of videos for the Matrix Vids compilations. So, again, like, I'm really happy to just see a nice trend of people that are now taking their agency back. But I think the next part would be figuring out jurisdictions, right, for common law and maritime law, and figuring out, or at least for me, is figuring out that whole obfuscation tactic. Like, most recently, I think I was the one that said, not here, obviously, but I was the one that said, what did I say? All right, so the Rockefeller Foundation. Rockefellers have their hands on everything, so they're just there to fund research that they find interesting, or whoever has the pen to give that check. They were handing out these checks willy nilly, right? But I've noticed the trend that they kind of stopped funding all the really wacky stuff, and I think they learned their lesson with people like Laughlin, people like Kinsey, where they were like, maybe we shouldn't directly kind of fund all of these really weird, wacky people that they asked their friends from other foundations in order to kind of facilitate the whole thing that they were doing. And, this all just goes into cybernetics because it's the system thinking that I'm like really focusing on and figuring out what were the systems that facilitated this social control that they have over us, or at least what were they had to have studies, right? They must have had studies that people willingly participated in order to kind of figure out like what was occurring in human ecology. I guess that's the best word I could use because I'm not too sure what that word even means. But yeah, self-imposed dark age. Very interesting to see all this, and moving forward is what I'm actually focusing on. Like, like, recovering from this point forward, what would that look like? How do I explain this? It's why I always make the argument that AI was designed because they didn't want to pay programmers to program all of the functions of things that they want, because it's not very easy to find people that would be able to do that. Instead, it's easier to design an AI, give it parameters, and allow that to just run loose. So very interesting. I'm not sure, especially because I'm looking at Iran and I'm looking at their morality police. Apparently, the morality police is currently having problems with their protesters over women not wanting to wear the jihad or the hijab. Jihad's the war stuff. No, the hijab, the thing that they have to wear over their face. And the protests have gotten really bad, and it just makes me wonder, like, where's this coming from? Like, this is it's not that it's a feminist tactic, but it's more that it's one of the current modern day liberal issues, and how it's being propagated forward and pushed is very interesting. just because I'm trying to understand it from the perspective of who does this benefit. Like, by and large, this only would really benefit one side of the aisle. So I don't know. Very interesting stuff. But what's my time? 15 minutes. Yeah, my name is Ramirez, and yeah, be ready for this up and coming dark age that we're about to experience, because apparently the people who kind of facilitate the infrastructure and facilitate all these aspects of our lives have currently planned to hit the detonation switch. They stopped caring about all this stuff, and yeah, why I've made this video so late is because I don't know, trying to like my schedule is still out of whack, and I'm still trying to figure out like a meaningful way of writing and doing all this without doing it too late. And I'm also incurring a very interesting lack of sleep that I can't figure out. But yeah, my name is Ramirez.